Hey, welcome to this new modelling series, modelling the Warhammer 40K Rhino Tank. So, this series is going to be slightly different than the last one, the Plasma Bolter. Some of the videos will be sped up 2 times with voice narration, and some of the videos I'll do them in real time, the same as the last one. So, not to panic, like if beginners, I know it's mostly beginners watching these, it's still at a good speed that that you can see exactly what's going on. As I say, I'll be narrating it as well, so you shouldn't have any problem following along. So I've the ref set up here. This is just a pretty good orthographic I got, this Rhino Tank, and then I've a couple of it's mostly just photographs, macro photographs of you know real world Games Workshop models. So there's loads of different variants of this tank and different designs and things. So I'm using this for all the main shapes, but there's a few bits here and there that are going to be slightly different because, as I say, I've chosen bits and pieces and details from different tanks that I like. So it'll almost be a kind of a mashup design of all different variants. I'm sure there'll be a few Warhammer nerds that'll be disgusted, but I'll just have to live with that, as I used to be a Warhammer nerd myself many years ago. But yeah, so as I say, I have these refs here set up. I'm not going to go into this in detail. I do that at the start of the Plasma Bolter series, so I'll just give a quick overview here. So the main things just to bear in mind, I have of me up, down, and front, back. So respective images dropped in there. P line turned off, and just adjust and cropped out each of the views to suit. And then what I did was I just you'll probably want it. These are going to be huge when you first set them up. So you want to, with your quick cube created here on 1 res each, what you want to do is kind of scale that just roughly to the size of the tank. So just grab your move tool and just get it roughly kind of the size. All we're doing is using this as a kind of a scale reference, and once you have that, so it's not much bigger than the default that it comes in at, you can just use this function here on each of the views, snap to mesh, and then we can keep the size fairly consistent with the default sort of scaling in Zbrush. So that's pretty much it. Just wanted to give this quick introduction. So when the video starts, it's going to be 2 times speeded up with narration, and I'm going to be starting here just with this cube over in this corner here. And without further ado, we'll get going. Right, so we're just starting off with our quick cube and moving it down into position with the transform tools, transpose tools, and just going to use masking, inverted masking, select whichever verts, invert the mask, and then just use the transpose move, position up the verts and Q mesh, and we bring out 4 sections and line them up with the important changes in where the topology is going to change. Line it up with the reference. So that's basically all it is for the start. And now when that's done, we're just going to control shift click and duplicate that and mirror it, and just use that duplicate to realign these verts for the back part. The back part is similar, obviously not exactly the same, so I'll just do the same thing. The important thing to do here is to line up, because you want to kind of plan out your topology so further down the road. It doesn't matter as much with this mesh because it's not going to be subdivided traditionally, sort of classically using Campbell Clark. We're going to be using the QGrid system, so topology doesn't matter as much. We don't need supporting edges. So just alt click to tag those faces, turn it on double there so we can it's easier, it makes edge selection easier when you have open borders. So just going to bridge 2 holes and just select the first edge, select the second edge, and now just going to transpose, mask and move. So it's good to get used to that trick of inverting your mask, selecting what you want to move, invert the mask. And now I'm just using the align function tool within the edges just to align those up to straighten them out. So I masked off what I didn't want to be affected. Now just a bit of tweaking with the vert slide tool. We'll just alt click tag those faces, Q mesh them up, changing the fill mode there so we can see our reference, and just lining them up again. Always planning out as you go, you know, important kind of edges. Just using the clip. It's handy to use the clip curve tool there just to straighten out the top. It didn't work in that case, but it's going to be very handy modeling here with Zmodeler. So that's pretty much the basic shape nearly modeled. So we'll just tag these faces all together and Q mesh them out. And now just more of the same. Line them up. Using that trick that, as I said before, you want to get used to is masking the verts that you want to affect, and then invert your mask. It seems a bit sort of slow way of doing things at the start, especially from me coming from Max, modeling in 3D Max, but you get used to it, obviously, with practice. I forgot to invert there, so just keep that in mind. And just keep going. It might be difficult for people to see exactly what's going on in this video because of the nature of the way that the mesh is displayed against the reference, but hopefully it's not too hard to see. So same thing again here. I'm just lining up these corner verts with the features on our reference where we're going to need fairly significant changes in topology. And just more tweaking, always looking at your reference and never adding topology until you really need it. It's a good rule of thumb to stick to for both sculpting and hard surface. Work with as low as you can with what you have until you can't work with it anymore, and then only add topology when and if you need it. So we bring the roof section out, lined up in the top now, and we're going to build that back part below that part I just extruded out. We're going to build that separately, and the part in the front, the middle as well, is going to be separate, as if, you know, it was constructed in real life in chunks and kind of welded together logically. So it's just a bit of a mishap there. I think some of those verts had been included in a selection that shouldn't have been, so just move them back into position there using the edge slide tool. Now just add some edges here to give us the detail we need to inset this section underneath that houses the tracks. Just a bit more tweaking just to line it up so it's parallel right the way around. Now we just alt click again and tag those faces, and slide that edge up, give us that parallel kind of the same as the front, and just Q mesh in. And you notice here at the front, when it starts to Q mesh in along the normal, those edges are nearly crossing over, so I just adjust them and Q mesh polygroup island, just drag it in a bit more. And just sort out that couple of rogue edges and verts there, align them back up, the ones that got moved inadvertently earlier on there. Lining up again, always you know, checking your reference. It doesn't have to be, you know, this isn't an engineering modeling exercise, and it doesn't have to be millimeter perfect, but you know, it's no harm to just check every now and again and tweak, get the base shape at least fairly lined up, give us a good base to work from. So I'm going to need to add a loop in there just to give us the thickness we need to bring these down, to Q mesh these faces down. Just line it up again, back and front, and Q mesh them down. Sometimes with the Q meshing, I find if you try to do groups of polys, it misinterprets what you want to do, so sometimes it can be easier to just select them one at a time. It really depends, I think. So just lining up again here with the refs. more tweaking. So you can get used to using them. You move, slide, and using the transpose moving. So you know your combination of different ways to move things around, and you can also use the clip curve brush, or clip rectangular, even clip circle. Or you just use the clip brush there on the roof, and on the front here, just to just to flatten that out. I'd noticed there was a bit of a bump in it, so it's easier to just clip it down to that plane and just realign it then. Just taking a look around the model just to see what to add next, where to go next. So I'm just realised that I forgot to inset that one, so I'm having a bit of trouble here because of the polygons behind it. It doesn't know how to interpret, so I'm just moving them out slightly. So you know, to see here, moving these back faces down just below where we want to extrude in, so it's not going to affect it. And we can just inset that one and then move flat island and just realign that once we have it extruded in. And pretty much the same at the back here. Checking around the model again. And the same operation as we did on the front, and just making sure to parallel those edges with the ref at the back, so our Q mesh works as we wanted to. And you can see here that one worked out okay because it was it's just nearly interpenetrating there, so just pull it back out slightly. Just going to add an extra edge loop in there. As you can see, you know, I'm just adding them where the features are on the reference. Alt click, drag them out and just line them up with the ref. You know, I also have, as I said earlier, on my second monitor there, I just have a selection of images from different angles of the actual physical miniatures, the models of the Rhino tank, and I'm just checking that as well as using the orthos. That's very important as well, because you mightn't interpret things in the orthos the way they actually are. So Q mesh them in just to give us that little housing for the lights, and just a bit of OCD tweaking. So I'm just going to mirror and weld it there across the Z axis and take a quick look, and going to turn on that dynamic subdivision with the QGrid up pretty high. I think it's at 9, and you can see from the side when I smoothed it, I could see sort of strange artifacting on the side where it was bumpy, so I just clipped it off, and that did a perfect job there of flattening everything out to a plane. And that's a very, very handy tool to use with this kind of modelling. And I'll show you later on another trick with dragging out a flat island and using the same technique with the clip. So you know, you want to, as you've noticed, I keep doing, as you model, as you add new features, just check it with your with turning on dynamic subdivision, just to make sure things are working out as you expect, because you don't want to get too far down the road. It's quite difficult to readjust topology in Zmodeler as opposed to doing it in your 3D package. So it's a good idea just to keep you know, checking every now and again when you add significant new details to the mesh. So just add a few edge loops again where I need details, check it with the ref, and it's good. So now we're going to start creating this inset and the door. I'm holding shift there to as I add in an edge loop, just to kind of straighten up the edge loop or snap it to whichever edge loop you start closest to along the edge ring. So we can mask these off and use the align edge tool again. So we want to straighten that up, and you can see the effect it's had there. It's straightened up the line in the middle, and now I'm going to do the same with this one. So you want to make sure to mask off. Well, if I hadn't masked off there either end, the topology would have been sort of destroyed. So there's that clip technique again, just to flatten out that surface. And now we can tweak a bit more before we start to add in the door inset. So always try to use existing topology, and where you don't have it and where you need it, then you can add in extra. So always try to see what you have first, as I'm doing here. Before you you know, if there's edges close to where you need them, you can just move them up or down, and it's a flat surface here, so it's not really going to affect the surrounding topology too much, or the effect, the result of it when it's subdid. So just alt clicking to tag those faces, and going to inset now, just to give us that little the opening between the door itself and the cutout. And now I'm just adding in these edge loops because I need some supporting topology there for these kind of hinges on the bottom of the door. And I've just hidden the rest to make it easier here for selecting with my mask, and just lining things up again with the ref. Quick look, and now we're going to use QMesh polygroup island and just extrude that in where the gap is going to be between the door and the frame. And you can see now there's a little bit of adjusting to do. Those edge loops aren't quite parallel. So we'll just use our mask again, inverted mask, just to sort of parallel those up. And I was going to use the slide tool and decided just to stick with the mask transpose moving. It might look like kind of an awkward sort of a way of doing things with the transpose mask and everything. When I first realised that that's one of the ways to be moving around in Zmodeler, I nearly wasn't even going to bother with it. But you know, so used to using Max and all the rest of it, but I stuck with it, and because I already had experience using the transpose line from sculpting in Zbrush, it didn't take me long at all. I'd always avoided some of the older techniques for hard surface stuff, dynameshing and all that sort of stuff, and masking and you know, inflating and all that sort of stuff, but I haven't really done any of it sort of at all. So I decided with the introduction of Zmodeler that I was just going to really concentrate on trying to improve, or even just to learn some ZBrush tricks for hard surface stuff, and no better time I suppose with Zmodeler. So just still aligning edges here, and they're existing edge loops I had, so I'm going to use them. Add some in here now where I don't have any, where they're needed. So these are all sort of, you know, it's all, they're important concepts for modeling. You know, you can also transfer these kind of modeling, this modeling knowledge to other packages. It's all transferable. You know, all the tools are essentially do the same thing, different ways of doing them, but they're the same type of tools for the same type of job. So now we can just Q mesh them in. I'm just going to straighten that one up. It's a little bit wonky, but you know, at the end, you usually, you know, nothing's ever perfect in the real world, and there's nothing worse than perfection kind of in CG. So unless it's a product shot of a wine bottle or something, but you know, you definitely, especially something like this, a war vehicle, you want to ding it up and bash it up. So if things aren't perfectly aligned, it's not a huge deal, even though it look like I'm tweaking it, but it's, you know, it's to have a bit of sort of bit of wear and tear and wonkiness in the surface is actually a good thing, you know, unless of course it's some sort of portfolio model where you want to show your modeling skills and you don't want it to look like a mistake. So just know when to do it and when not to do it. So I'll just hide that selection again, Control Shift, and the green box is gonna hide everything else bar what you selected. Hold Alt and that would have been the red, would have changed red, and that would have hidden what you selected. So a few more edge loops to add in. And a bit more tweaking, and just remember it's you always want to start your mask off the model when you're using the transpose, or else it'll just drag out transpose line. So you want to drag out your mask in a blank part of the canvas, and then once you have started the mask, you can then just move it and change it when it's not in a blank part of the canvas, when it's over the model. So we'll just tag those face. We'll leave those because I'll sort them out in a minute. Have to change some topology around first, and Q meshing. And now we'll just rearrange a bit of the topology down here, add in an edge, a loop, and just rearrange some topology. Now I know I'm kind of repeating myself over and over again, but this is what's involved with modeling. It's a lot of repetitive sort of stuff. I love doing it. Your brain just goes into a mode, and you know, sometimes you can be sitting there for 10 hours straight, and the time flies in. It's just so you get into some sort of zone. It's like being in your own world. But it is it's a lot of repetitive sort of stuff, but not in a boring way, almost in a meditative way. And plus you're solving problems all the time. A giant digital puzzle. So I'm making use of the slice curve here just to add an edge loop straight through the middle there, which we couldn't have done by just inserting an edge loop because it would have followed the existing topology. So that's a handy tool to use as well. If anyone uses 3D Max, it's the same as the quick slice tool or the slice tool. Just cuts right the way through everything, regardless of existing topology. And as well as using slide, we can also use move when you're in an orthographic view and and you're not at the very edge, because you know it's always going to be moving in on an orthographic plane. So just a bit of adjusting again there, and I just pressed Alt to deselect that one that was in the selection and just inset that tagged face selection. And now I'm going to inset this polygroup island, but first I want to use polygroup and just change the color of that one so it doesn't get included in this selection for the Q mesh inward extrude. A bit more detail and work there on these door hinges. So some of this stuff, you know, you get a rough idea of what's going on in the reference, and then you can sort of just wing it or just kind of design on the fly as you go and just decide what you think looks good. So I'm using the repeat last there. If you you know, do the operation once and then I can just click and I'll just repeat last. I did it there with the extrude, the Q mesh extrude. So once you tag these faces, they'll all be included. Do them all in one go. And just using the slide edge there just to rearrange some of that topology. I could have spent a bit more time with the initial where this was extruded out from, just so I didn't have to do this messing around, but I was just doing it quickly there, so it didn't really make too much difference. It didn't take long. Didn't take long at all. And you can see that sort of the wonkiness I was talking about, where they're not all perfectly straight. So we're just going to Q mesh to bridge those two polys, and Alt click again to tag them. And we just bring those two straight out from the door, so when we smooth it, it's going to kind of look like it's welded at the bottom there. So that's the kind of look that we want. And just trying something out, but it looks shit, so just undo that and leave it at that. And now we'll add in the details on the door. So it's, if you play around with in the dynamic subdivision, I didn't really go over it much in any other videos. If you play around with the QGrid, you can see the different results. It's perfect for working on you know, low poly models with all 90-degree angles. It's absolutely perfect for it. Doesn't really play too well with nasty 5+ valence point poles, which means any vert where more than 5 edges, or even 5 edges, and sometimes 3 for the look of the smoothing, converge, where that amount of edges converge in a single vert on a corner, not on the flat surface. It's grand, but if it's on a corner or a curve, you're going to have unsightly kind of artifacting when you smooth. So it's just something to bear in mind. Checking again just with smoothing and perspective on there, just to see where we're at. Check around the model mirror and weld across Z, and maybe that's not deep enough, that recess. So I'm just going to Q mesh polygroup island, just bringing in another bit just to sharpen it up, make it look a bit deeper. And now we're going to just cut in these little sort of insets in the top. You can see where I'm adding the extra topology needed to shape this out. So I realised they added an extra one I didn't need, so I just got rid of that. Remove that vert in, and that's pretty much it. A bit more topology rearranging. So you can see I'm just going to add loops in when I need them. because it's a completely square model that we're not using Catmull Clark traditional subdividing on, it isn't really as much of a problem. You could never do what I'm doing here, using Catmull Clark subdivision surfaces without doing a huge amount of cleanup. I would have built this a totally different way. It's years. I haven't box modeled in years. I use edge extrusion model, so this is kind of it's a good project for me to be working on as well. These projects that are using box modeling, because I say I haven't, a long time since I've done it, so it's actually great fun in Zmodeler. So we're just using the scale edge loop complete tool there, and then once you do one, you can just click on the other ones to repeat last. And so we'll just tag them and extrude them down. Mirror and weld. Stick on dynamic subdivision and have a look at the result. And now I'm using them. This is the trick here with the clip tool. I've dragged both of those out using flat island selection, and I can drag them out past all the other areas that you couldn't have clipped because they're in the way. Clip it and then drag them back in. It's actually I discovered it while I was building this. It's actually an extremely handy thing to be able to do. Extremely handy. So I'd nearly go back and rewatch that part again. Unfortunately, I had a crash and I lost the last little bit of modeling I did, but basically all it is was this part here, which I'll show you through the undo buffer in a second, and a few more of the exact same sort of techniques we've been using. Simple sort of extrusion stuff. So you can see here I've just added in some edge loops, and you can see all this crazy topology here, but we don't have to worry about that. You know, we might clean up some of these edges here and there, but because this is all 90-degree hard surface stuff, it would be easy, very easy to re-topologize this automatically, or else just leave it like this, because even if it's a game model, you could clean up some of the edges and that, but it wouldn't matter too much because we're not using traditional Catmull Clark. It isn't going to affect it as much. And then when you do use the QGrid smoothing, any areas you do see that are a bit sort of wonky looking, you can always just stitch the edges up. So I might show a little bit of that later on. But as I was saying, I'm just going to, it's hard to see when it's all one poly group, so I'll just come down to poly groups, groups by normals, and because it's all 90-degree angles, well, except for one or two, 85 or whatever, we're going to get some nice poly grouping. So you can see a bit more clearly the extra work I've done here. I've just, using Q mesh, I've just put these cutouts in on the bottom, and then we've just inset these little areas here and extruded out this sort of foot ledge. A couple of inner extrusions here and a couple of them here, and that's the only things extra from on the main tank itself from the end of the last video. And I'll just show you this little part here. So I'll click on that to select it, and then just solo mode, and I'll turn off smoothing, sorry, turn polyframe back on. So if I go back to the start here of the undo buffer, you can see what I did was I just selected these faces and used Q mesh holding down control, and that broke it away. And then I just with the transpose selected, just control sorry, oh shit, I'm after getting rid of the undos. Shit, that was a big mistake. Okay, I'll just show you really quickly what I did instead. So all I did was just insert a couple of edge loops, and then we can just just slide these and edge loop complete, and we just kind of space them out equally, or fairly equidistant. And then if you come into geometry here and modify topology, you can see this grid divide. What that does, it's going to subdivide the mesh, but it won't smooth it. It'll just add in, it'll tessellate it, which means it's just going to divide every face by 4, the same as it would do normally subdividing. So I'll just space some of these out again and hit grid divide, And now if I go to split point, I can just start splitting these points. I'm just clicking to repeat last. So once you have one done, you can just click then repeat last, and we can just Q mesh a polygroup island, just drag one of them in and just do the same, click, click, and just keep clicking. And as I say, it'll repeat last. And now when we subdivide that, you can see it's still on a Q grid, but this is a circular shape, so we don't want that because it's going to facet these. So I want to turn our Q grid down to 0, and you can even bump up our smooth subdivs over here to 4, and still on 2 because yeah. So now you can see, and that's pretty much all I did then. I might have just got it into position and just tweaked it a bit, but yeah, that's pretty much all I did. So you didn't really miss anything. Just a few simple extrusions using the same techniques, and then what I just showed you there. So that will be the end of this section, and in the next section we're going to model these exhaust housings and the exhaust pipe itself, and I'm going to do that one in real time. Right, well, I'll see you in the next one then. Cheers, thanks, good luck.